In 2019, Vatican archivists discovered a sealed chamber beneath St. Peter's Basilica containing documents that the Catholic Church has kept hidden for over 500 years. These papers reveal that Cardinal Alessandro Farnese didn't just break his vow of celibacy, he ran the most systematic child breeding program in European history, right under the Pope's nose. Between 1492 and 1534, Farnese purchased over 200 children from impoverished families across Italy, not for adoption or charity, but to create what he called perfect servants of God. The documents detail how he selected children based on their physical beauty, separated them by gender, and forced them into arranged relationships to produce offspring that would serve the Vatican for generations. What happened in those hidden chambers beneath the Vatican makes the modern abuse scandals look like footnotes in comparison. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. Alessandro Farnese's story begins in the complex Vatican politics of the late 15th century. Born in 1468, Farnese came from a powerful Italian family, but his real power came from his sister Giulia's relationship with Pope Alexander VI. Giulia, Farnese was one of the most beautiful women of her time and was known as the Pope's mistress. Thanks to this family connection, Alessandro quickly rose through the Catholic Church hierarchy. In 1493, at only 25 years old, he was made cardinal. This was a rank normally given to much older and more experienced clergymen, but Alessandro's situation was far from normal. Pope Alexander was rewarding his mistress's brother while also trying to keep him under control. During this period, a dark plan began to form in Alessandro's mind. In his first years at the Vatican, he learned how the church hierarchy worked, how power was obtained, and most importantly, how people could be controlled. In his view, the Catholic Church's greatest weakness was its vulnerability to constant external threats. Popes changed, political balances shifted, but one thing never changed: the need for reliable, loyal servants. Alessandro's solution was simple: create an army of servants loyal to him. But these servants wouldn't be chosen from ordinary people. They would be raised from childhood, know no life outside the Vatican, and most importantly, show absolute loyalty to Alessandro. When he purchased his first children in 1492, the plan was not yet fully formed. He thought he was helping a starving family on the streets of Rome. The family received 50 gold florins in exchange for their 7-year-old daughter Caterina and 9-year-old son Marco, a huge sum for that time. Alessandro told the children they would work in God's service. Technically, he wasn't lying. In the early years, the children lived like general servants of the Vatican. They did cleaning, food service, gardening, but Alessandro was carefully observing them. He was recording how they grew, how they behaved, and most importantly, how they could be educated. By 1495, Alessandro's plan had become clear. Simply using existing servants wasn't enough. He needed to create new generations. And the way to produce these generations in a controlled manner was to marry the children to each other. When Caterina reached age 10, Alessandro declared her engaged to Marco. This wasn't a normal childhood engagement. Both were now living in special rooms, taking special lessons, and being prepared for their marriage. The children didn't fully understand what this meant, but they knew very well that they had no alternatives. The true scale of Alessandro's child breeding program began to emerge in 1498. By this date, approximately 30 children were working in the Vatican, but these were no longer sufficient. Alessandro was planning a larger operation. He had agents in different cities across Italy. These agents would identify poor families and offer them the opportunity to put their children into Vatican service. Of course, they didn't reveal the real purpose. They told families that children would receive religious education, be well-fed, and rise in the church hierarchy in the future. In reality, Alessandro was selecting children according to very specific criteria. The age range had to be between 6 to 12. They had to be physically healthy and beautiful. Most importantly, their family ties had to be weak, meaning there had to be little chance of family members wanting their children back. The selection process was horrifying. Alessandro personally examined the children, checking their physical development and evaluating their future productivity. These examinations involved completely naked inspection of the children. Alessandro kept detailed notes for each child: height, weight, hair color, eye color, and reproductive potential. By 1500, more than 60 children were living in the Vatican. Alessandro had grouped them by age and gender. Male children stayed in one section, female children in another, but regular social activities were organized to allow the children to meet each other. The purpose of these activities was to help children bond with each other, but under Alessandro's control. He decided which child would spend time with which child. His goal was to predetermine the couples he would marry in the future and ensure they bonded with each other. The first marriage took place in 1501. Caterina was now 16 and Marco had passed. 18, Alessandro married them in a simple ceremony and placed them in a special room. This room resembled a laboratory more than a normal bedroom. Everything needed to monitor the pregnancy process was there. Caterina's first pregnancy began in 1502. Alessandro celebrated this as a great success. Finally, his plan was beginning to work, but he knew this was just the beginning. One child wasn't enough. He needed hundreds of children to create an army loyal to himself. During this period, Alessandro began allocating more resources to systematize his operation. He built special sections in the Vatican. These sections were designed according to the different life stages of children: nursery-style areas for small children, education classrooms for older children, and special bedrooms for married couples. One of the most disturbing details was that Alessandro identified children not by their names but by numbers. Each child was given a number, and this number determined their identity. Caterina became C1, Marco was M1. This transformed children from human beings into objects. By 1505, Alessandro's operation had gained an industrial dimension. More than 120 children were living in the Vatican, and more than 30 of them were of breeding age. Alessandro was systematically pairing them and ensuring they produced children. One of the most horrifying details that emerged during this period was that Alessandro began practicing genetic selection. Modern genetic science had not yet developed, but Alessandro was carefully tracking the physical characteristics of children and planning which traits should be combined to produce better children. For example, he was pairing especially beautiful children with each other because he thought beautiful children would have more beautiful babies. He was also marrying intelligent children to each other because he wanted intelligent babies. This was the exact equivalent of breeding humans like animals. The children had no choice. When they reached age 14, Alessandro would tell them who they would marry, and there was no possibility of objecting to this decision. Children who objected were punished, sometimes left hungry for days, or kept in isolation cells. Reading what Alessandro wrote in his personal journals during this period is horrifying. He viewed children completely as objects and was completely indifferent to their pain. In one journal entry he writes, "The union of C15 and N12 did not yield the expected result. The child was born weak and died early. In the future, C15 needs to be paired with a stronger male." Children were taken from their mothers from the moment they were born. Alessandro thought the mother-child bond was harmful to the children's education. Babies were given to special caregivers, and mothers could only see them to nurse them. This system was unbearable torture for mothers. They heard the children's whimpering and crying but couldn't comfort them. Many mothers lost their sanity from being unable to bear this situation. Alessandro saw this as a sign of weakness and removed these women from the program. By 1510, there were also second-generation children in the Vatican. That is, children who were the product of Alessandro's program. These children had never seen a normal world. From birth, they knew only the Vatican walls, only Alessandro's system. Second-generation children were even easier to control because they knew no other way of life. The system was normal for them, and they had no alternative to question. Alessandro was very pleased with this. His plan was working. One of the most shocking aspects of Alessandro's operation was that the Pope was aware of this situation and even supported it. Pope Alexander VI initially thought Alessandro was doing charity work, but when he learned the real situation over time, he decided to legitimize it rather than stop it. From the Pope's perspective, what Alessandro was doing was actually beneficial for the Vatican. Creating an army of loyal, controllable servants increased the Church's power. Moreover, this system was completely legal. Children had been purchased, marriages had been performed, and everything had been officially recorded. When Pope Alexander VI died in 1506, Pope Julius II, who succeeded him, was also aware of the situation. Alessandro explained the situation to him in detail, and Pope Julius also continued to support the operation. He even allocated additional resources to make this work more systematic. During this period, Alessandro made his operation an official department of the Vatican. He established a unit called the Youth Services Department and became its head. What he was doing was no longer just a personal project, but an official Vatican policy. The Youth Services Department's budget was very large. Alessandro was spending thousands of florins annually to purchase children. Large sums were also needed for housing, feeding, and educating the children. But the Vatican legitimized these under the heading of religious education of youth. During this period, Alessandro's operation began to expand outside Italy as well. He began bringing children from France, Spain, and even Germany. His goal was to produce more perfect children by combining the characteristics of different races. International child trafficking was much more complex and dangerous. Alessandro had agents in different countries, and they were buying local officials with bribes. Children were usually taken from their families under the pretext of being sent to Rome for religious education. One of the most horrifying records from this period is the documents where Alessandro conducted quality control. Every 6 months, he would evaluate all children and determine which ones were productive and which ones were unsuccessful. Those deemed unsuccessful were removed from the program and assigned to other duties. We don't know exactly what these other duties were, but it's certain that the children were never seen again. In 1515, the first serious rebellion occurred in Alessandro's operation. A group of 18-year-olds began questioning their own situation and asking questions about the system. These young people had begun to become aware of the world outside the Vatican and learned how normal people lived. The leader of the rebellion was a young man named Marco, coded N23. He was one of Alessandro's first-generation children and had been living in the system for 17 years. But now he was asking questions. Why can't we live freely when other people can? Why can't we choose our own spouses? Why can't we see our children? Marco organized other young people and prepared an escape plan. The plan was simple. While the night guards were changing, they would escape from the Vatican as a group. They would hide in Rome and try to establish a normal life, but the plan failed. Alessandro's espionage network was very developed, and he had informants among the children as well. The rebellion plan was reported to Alessandro, and Marco and his friends were caught. The punishment was horrible. Marco and the other rebels were punished in front of the other children. Alessandro saw this as an educational opportunity. The other children should see the consequences of rebellion and never think of such things again. The punishment applied to Marco was particularly merciless. He was left hungry for days, beaten, and kept in an isolation cell. But the worst punishment was taking away his breeding right. Alessandro had an operation performed to ensure that Marco would never have children again. This incident had the desired effect on the other children. No one was thinking of rebelling anymore. The system had protected itself through fear and continued. After the rebellion incident, Alessandro increased security measures. Children were now kept under stricter surveillance, and their contact with the outside world was completely cut off. Additionally, he began using psychological manipulation techniques to control the children's mental development. By 1525, Alessandro's operation had reached its peak. More than 300 children were living in the Vatican, and most of them were the product of the system. Third-generation children had also begun to be born. Alessandro was 57 years old and aging, but still energetic. He was constantly trying new methods to perfect his operation. His most disturbing innovation during this period was beginning to raise children for even more specific characteristics. Some children were selected for intelligence and paired with each other, trying to produce more intelligent children. Some were selected for strength, targeting physically stronger children. Others were used for beauty, trying to create children that met Alessandro's aesthetic criteria. The reports Alessandro wrote during this period are very striking for understanding his mentality. He viewed children completely as products and put them through quality control. Children deemed unsuccessful were classified as waste products and eliminated. But the system had become too big and complex. Alessandro could no longer control it alone and had to give more authority to his assistants. This began to create cracks in the system. In 1527, when the sack of Rome occurred, Pope Clement VII decided to examine Alessandro's operation. The Pope had focused on moral problems within the Church and began to think that what Alessandro was doing was damaging the Church's image. The investigation committee thoroughly researched the child program in the Vatican. Committee members were shocked by what they saw, but even more shocking was how these things had remained secret for so long. In his defense, Alessandro said that everything he did was for the benefit of the Church, that the children were well cared for, and that they served God. But the committee clearly determined that the situation was systematic abuse. In 1534, Alessandro Farnese became Pope Paul III. Ironically, the man who had abused children was now at the head of the Catholic Church. But when he became Pope, he had to stop his operation because it was now attracting too much attention. After becoming Pope Paul III, Alessandro launched a major operation to hide his past. All documents related to the child program were destroyed, witnesses were silenced, and even the children were dispersed. Some of the children were sent to different monasteries across Europe. Some were placed with normal families under the pretext of marriage. But what happened to some of them was never learned. Alessandro was determined to eliminate any evidence that could expose him. But it wasn't possible to destroy everything completely. The Vatican's architecture couldn't be changed, and the special rooms, secret passages, and other physical evidence continued to remain there. Alessandro sealed these areas to prevent access but couldn't destroy them completely. For centuries, only legends and rumors remained about Alessandro's operation. Some historians suspected strange things at the Vatican but couldn't find concrete evidence. In the 20th century, the first clues began to emerge during restoration work at the Vatican. Secret rooms, strange arrangements, and inexplicable architectural features were discovered behind old walls. In 1987, during a major restoration, Alessandro's breeding rooms were discovered. These rooms were clearly designed to keep children under control. Lists of children as numbers, genetic charts, and breeding programs were found on the walls. In 2003, Alessandro's personal journals were discovered. These journals had been stored in a secret compartment in a sealed wall. The journals revealed the full scope of the operation and Alessandro's mentality. The latest discovery was made in 2019. Vatican archivists discovered a previously unknown room beneath St. Peter's Basilica. In this room, all the official documents of the operation, children's records, and even some personal belongings were found. These discoveries brought to light one of history's most systematic child abuse cases. Alessandro Farnese's operation represented a system much larger and more organized than modern child abuse scandals. Alessandro Farnese's story is not just one person's perversion, it's a horrifying example of how institutional power can be abused and how systems can transform people into objects. This operation lasted 40 years and destroyed the lives of hundreds of children. Children were not only subjected to physical and sexual abuse, their humanity was systematically destroyed. Names were replaced with numbers, families were torn apart, and traumas were created that would last for generations. Alessandro becoming Pope is the most ironic aspect of this story. The man who abused children became the spiritual leader of millions of Catholics. This is the most extreme example of institutional hypocrisy. From a modern perspective, Alessandro's operation is a systematic organization that combines human trafficking, child abuse, forced marriage, and many other crimes. Today, such actions are considered universal human rights violations. This story also shows the dangers of power and lack of oversight. Alessandro's operation was possible because no one was questioning him. The Pope's support legitimized the operation and prevented criticism. Today's child abuse scandals show a similar structure. Powerful institutions can hide systematic abuse for many years, and victims can be condemned to silence. Alessandro's story is a 500-year-old example of how such systems work and how they are protected. The most tragic aspect is that we don't know the names of any of the victims of this operation. They remained only as numbers C1, M1, C15. 1023, their real names, dreams, fears, and pain were lost in the depths of history. Alessandro Farnese died as Pope in 1549, remembered as a respected clergyman, and the process for sainthood was even begun. But his true legacy remained hidden in the stolen lives of hundreds of children. This story is not just a dark page from the past, it's a warning that the present must not forget. Protecting children is the responsibility not just of parents, but of all society. And no institution, no matter how sacred it may be considered, can be powerful enough to legitimize child abuse. The children's voices that still echo in those sealed rooms beneath the Vatican remain as a silent cry against injustice. Speaking on their behalf and preventing similar tragedies from recurring should be the most fundamental duty of the modern world.